It's difficult to convey through words how our project in Timor-Leste has shifted my outward and inward perspective. Not only has it changed how I view my place in the world, but the meaning of community, gratitude, how I teach and learn, and most importantly, how to genuinely interact with others. The aim of the project was to successfully teach English grammar conventions through dance while subconsciously facilitating an intercultural exchange through conversations, dance, activities, and games. However, another fundamental aspect of the project was to gain an understanding of Timor-Leste's rich cultural heritage, conflicting past, and emphasis on creating a more united and stable future, particularly for the large amount of youth living here. Watching movies on Timor-Leste's war-torn past during our 3-day intensive program was nothing in comparison to visiting some of the historical sites and hearing our facilitator Dulcie's stories on the atrocities Indonesia inflicted on the Timorese people. Gaining first-hand insight into the corrupt past of Timor-Leste while simultaneously immersing ourselves in an environment that was full of acceptance, unconditional love, laughter, and willingness to learn was a paradox I haven't had the pleasure of experiencing prior to this trip. Noticing common emerging themes in my travel journal, I would like to take this opportunity to look deeper into 3 topics I feel have had the most dramatic shift over the task: my development in teaching practice, reflection of personal growth and awareness, and to identify how my goals and values may have changed. Prior to departing for Timor-Leste, teaching was something I felt confident and sure of. I've taught dance since 2012 and have run 2 locations for my dance school over the last 2 years. However, walking into AHA on the first day, all eyes staring curiously, I questioned whether I had anything fully valuable or worthy to teach to people who have lived such complex lives and experienced so many struggles. Teaching them our hip-hop dance in groups and meeting their classes, I noticed not only how intelligent and willing to learn these students were, but how much these people just wanted to be in our presence, hear our stories, ideas, and explanations of home. Richardson explains constructivist teaching as a meaning-making theory that suggests individuals create their own new understandings based upon the interaction of what they already know and believe, and the phenomena or ideas of which they come into contact. This theory set the tone for the rest of the project, understanding that while from an assessment outlook I was being marked on teaching skills and development, but from a personal perspective I wanted to create connections and support networks between students and myself. I felt this approach made building relationships a lot easier and more comfortable for me, as going into this project I was naturally nervous and cautious. Teaching in Meliana was a memorable, challenging, and rewarding experience I only hope to have the pleasure of feeling again. In true Timor-Leste style, our first lesson was cancelled due to the teachers having a late lunch and the students being sent home. And in true QUT style, we invited the students to Encouragement House for a 2-hour session of introductions, games, and dance activities. Our first formal teaching lesson, Jenny and Dulcie questioned the relevance of our content. And while this feedback was a little disheartening, Susie, April, and myself went back to the drawing board to develop something of a higher standard. It was very important to all group members that Jenny and Dulcie saw how willing we were to take on feedback, develop and rearrange aspects of the plan so that both students and teachers could have a positive and relevant learning experience. The teaching experience in Timor-Leste required us to be completely adaptable, enthusiastic, and sincere, and as a result, I feel confident and understand more about what dance is capable of. An important aspect of my reflection, both before, during, and after, was to be aware and acknowledge how I was feeling, changing, and approaching exercises and experiences. My first challenge was to overcome and stop comparing myself with other people on the trip. Some participants were very loud and vocal about their thoughts and feelings. Some people made connections with students very quickly. And with our first class not going quite as well as we had expected, as a group, we felt that everyone else had done better. I had to recognize early in the trip that if I wanted to gain the most from the experiences and opportunities presented, I would have to focus solely on my own learning practice and limit my comparison with others. I also had to accept that people interact in different ways, and that by me not being as loud as others didn't necessarily mean what I had to say was less important. I felt most in sync as a group during our final performance day in Maliana, where the product of love, education, and dance all came together in a community setting, and we danced on a stage like no other. This moment highlighted how differences create strength, and everyone that participated, students and teachers alike, had assisted in the final product. While there were many small personal changes that occurred, the biggest observation I made was how we as a society interrupt and speak about ourselves. I often felt the reflection times were damaged and disjointed due to people interrupting and steering the conversation back to their own personal experiences when there were people who hadn't had a chance to actively participate for long periods of time. Rogers and Farson explained the benefits of active listening by saying, "Despite the popular notion that listening is a passive approach, research evidence clearly shows that sensitive listening is a most effective agent for individual personality change and group development. Listening brings about changes in people's attitudes towards themselves and others. People who have been listened to like this become more emotionally mature, more open to their experiences, less defensive, more democratic, and less authoritarian." Over the course of the trip, I became more and more aware of how little we do actively listen, and I now make a very conscious effort of listening, understanding, and then responding, rather than reply with my own experience or opinion immediately. Over the duration of the project, my core goals and values remained fairly unchanged. However, many activities we experienced prompted me to question my role in society, how my environment is intrinsically linked in shaping my beliefs, and my responsibility as a woman. This was especially evident when visiting OHM in Maliana and hearing how young, uneducated women are treated, sold into marriages as adolescents, and expected to undertake all domestic chores. Chimamanda Adichie paraphrases the definition of feminism as a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. This description highlighted the distinct cultural difference between Australia and Timor-Leste, but more importantly, how contrastingly families and communities treat their young women across the two borders. Even reflecting in our own group, I feel very privileged to have grown up in such an open and encouraging family where your gender does not specify or limit your role in society or at home. In some ways, I feel that it is our duty as women to stand up for ourselves and others and simply not accept that we're second-class people. However, I now understand when sexism is so ingrained in a community such as Timor-Leste, it's not that simple. Huge change needs to be facilitated from the top before it can spread down to smaller communities and families. I now wonder if it is a responsibility of mine to help other women. Are there friends of mine that feel they cannot do things because they are female? These questions help me challenge the assumed role society requests us to conform to, and aid in accepting difference, personality distinctions, and other minority groups that may feel segregated. Another value I became aware of during the project was openness. Listening to the brave men who were tortured, shot, or affected by the Indonesian occupation at the prison, and listening to Dulcie's stories about being bullied and constantly running for such a long time, taught me a whole new appreciation for being open and willing to trust and love again. Sharing stories like those takes bravery in itself, and every time Dulcie cried, I recognized how passionate and deep these pains run through Timorese people. In our society, we so often judge people on their looks, occupations, or material possessions. But what I was heavily reminded of in Timor was that these things are so far from who people truly are. Watching the DVD Alias Ruby Blade and hearing how passionate the passionate love Kirsty Sword felt for Timor, I questioned why on arrival. However, driving back from Meliana to Dili, everything looked more beautiful, houses looked less poor, and I felt so sad knowing there is a probability I won't see those people again. The undying love, bravery, hospitality, and compassion the Timorese people so strongly exemplify are characteristics that resonate with anyone who visits their wonderful country. Their solid commitment to education has inspired me to better my practice, and each teaching opportunity I experienced on this project brought new challenges, delights, and understandings to myself and hopefully my students. Reflecting and becoming aware of how to genuinely interact with others without putting my needs and opinions first was something I won't forget and will surely better my relationships and conversations with others. Finally, being exposed to so many brave and strong women who do their absolute best to bring about equality and are so willing to share their hurtful stories inspires me to not self-doubt, have courage, and be empathetic of people's situations and circumstances. What was once a project I was slightly frightened of and explaining as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I felt melancholy disembarking the plane and coming home, and is something I now wish to experience again and again.